right. All right. All right. We are. What? Say that again?
It's Monday again.
It is Monday. It just so happens to be Monday again. That keeps happening. It's like the, I don't know, 30 something time. No. Oh, man. All right. Welcome to Monday. It's noon, so I can't say morning. I think I've close to broken myself of that habit. So,
Good,
um,
good.
it's Monday, and welcome to the HEF podcast. HEF stands for the Home Education Foundation. The Home Education Foundation is an organization that was started by Brenda Dickinson back in the 90s after she helped get home education recognized in statutes and carved out as a right for parents to choose back in the 1985. And there were a lot of key players and a lot of effort that went into that. But there she was at the front of it, holding the torch. And we're so glad that she did because now we have so many educational choices for that. And Home Education Foundation is committed to being the parent's voice at the Capitol, just as it has been, just as Brenda has been for the last 40 years. We will continue to be. And this podcast is a big part of that, bringing communication, information, legislative updates, and Q&A sessions to our community throughout Florida, parents who want to direct the education of their own children in ways that they see fit. And to do that, we have all of our top sponsors who come together and really help make these ventures possible. We couldn't do it without them, so we're very, very thankful for them. We have Arete, we have FPEA, Fisher Precious Metals, and TBHC Group. FPEA has a convention coming up. If you didn't know, then you need to know. Or maybe you've been hiding under a rock, or maybe you're one of those people who just started homeschooling just since COVID and when the numbers kind of ballooned up and blew up. And so maybe you should check them out. Maybe you should go look at the Florida Parent Educators Association and their convention and see what they have to offer. Um, we also have TBHC Group. Their conference is coming up in July. Both of these are the kind of the two biggest. TBHC's is a little bit more recent, so they're a little newer to the scene, but they've started with a big crowd, and they serve that Tampa Bay community really, really well. So if you're new and you're looking for information, or you just need some community and help, you feel like you're doing it on your own, you should definitely reach out to one of those two organizations. See how you can plug in and find some community. And we're going to say thank you once more to our top sponsors. So now let's move into Monday. Brenda, how are you?
Doing pretty good.
Good.
Starting, what is this, 3 more weeks left in session?
Wow, it goes so fast. I know that I was talking to some of the legislators, and they're like, "Look, we've only got like 6 months until the next session," and I'm like, "Wow, is that how we look at things now?" like, like some of these things they're like, "We'll tackle next session. We're only 6 months away," and I'm like, "Man, when you say it like that, it just hits different." But
And
they're
we
right.
say, but we need to fix it this session.
That's right. Yeah, there are some things we definitely want fixed this session for sure. And I know that everybody's probably that's why they're here. There's a lot of questions about HB 7 or sorry, Senate Bill 7030 and House Bill 5101 and 1255 and 531 and I'm on and on and on and on and on. And I sound like a computer, pumping out all those numbers, but I promise I speak English. So let's get into some of it. I think this week people are not going to see if you're looking at legislative sessions and committees and things, you're probably not going to see those two bills referred much. I don't think you're going to see them on the agenda at all this week. And those bills are going to go into conference. So, Brenda, would you like to kind of describe what it because you're the veteran with all of the history. Why don't you describe kind of what happens to a bill whenever the House bill and the Senate bill are companions, but they don't look anything like each other. And so in order to kind of fix that, they have to go into conference.
Well,
What does
This
that mean?
happens pretty often with appropriations bills, and 5101 is the House Appropriation Education Bill, Education Appropriations Bill. I haven't seen as much policy in that bill as there is in 7030. So they're definitely different, but they're
Right.
both the vehicles to which each chamber is going to use to go to conference.
So
So
if somebody is thinking, what do you mean appropriations and policy or budget and policy, and you don't see that in those two bills, could you go, before you keep moving forward, could you break that down a little bit?
well, the only thing that the legislature is required to do is have a budget, approve a budget for the next 2 years. So they are they work on different issues that come up, and in the scholarships, which our people are primarily interested in, there are other committees that have budgets relating to all kinds of things: agriculture, land use, just a variety of health issues. But they have to decide how much of the state's money is going to go into each of these areas that the state supplements. Education is a big one. It takes a big portion from VPK right through the universities. The legislature has to appropriate the monies, thus the appropriations bill. So they decide what's going to go in, how it's going to be spent. And policy bills are generally the individual bills that focus on one subject, and they may have laws pertaining to, I was reading this morning, construction liens. There's a bill that is going to address how and why the once the contractor completes something that was not according to the homeowner's satisfaction, how they're going to remove the liens. So there are all kinds of issues out there that the legislators are interested in. But
So
the ones that we
if,
focus on are the ones pertaining to education.
right. And if we have some really young homeschoolers listening, would it be a way of explaining it, or an example of explaining it, as saying budget bills determine how much money goes to education, but policy bills determine what happens in the education, or what's in a curriculum for public schools, or how some of the processes are handled. So one of them, it focuses on how much money goes there, and the other one focuses on what they do with the money. Is that a fair way of breaking it down?
In the big picture, because in the appropriations bill, once they pass a budget, once they decide on the numbers, because I think the House and Senate are like $3 billion apart. So they're going to have to do a lot of give and take to come up with a balanced budget. They can't spend more money than they take in. And so they will have language that is conforming language to the budget. So, for example, if they, well, let me think of an example. They could, I don't know how this is going to work out, because a lot of it is mysterious as to how it ends up in the end. But they could take some of the policy that is in the bill relating to the payments that are going to be made for the scholarships, the PEP, in the upcoming year. If they could put that in conforming language. So it would not necessarily be a bill separate. It's like they have all the numbers, and that's the appropriation bill. But then they have another bill that travels with it that has language that conforms the law to whatever the numbers are. And it could be that that we'll see some of our language there, rather than 70/30, which is kind of more broad than the House bill.
Yeah.
It may not be there. And we don't know which is going to be the main vehicle. My guess
Right.
is it's going to be the House bill is the one that's going to pass. So
Mm.
5101.
Okay. So the House bill might become the vehicle for um, moving the language into that bill as it passes,
Right.
is what you're suggesting. So I think it's important to keep an eye on these. So this is Senate Bill 7030 for those who may have just jumped in. I just saw a spike kind of in our viewership, so let me go back. We're talking about Senate Bill 7030 and House Bill 5101. They're both the education appropriations and budget committee bills um, that are running companions to one another, and they don't look like each other. So a lot of the focus, I think, on our podcast the last couple of weeks has been on the Senate bill because the language in the Senate bill has had some issues. It's just the truth of it. It's had some wording and some issues that were not super friendly to home education or homeschoolers in Florida. And so we've had some interesting conversations with people behind the scenes. We've had some great conversations with our senators, and we've worked with them. We have a number. Let me just throw out there that we have a number of very astute, careful, caring, they're detail minded people and they care about the future of these programs. But more importantly, each of the senators that we've spoken to care about the rights of parents in Florida. And to them, in speaking with them, they care more about enshrining the rights of parents here than they do about particular restraints on the program. So in their list of priorities, parents' rights are first for them, and the ones that we've spoken to, and they're also homeschoolers. Some of them are also participating in the PEP scholarship. Some of them do not participate in the PEP scholarship, but they are enrolled in home education. And some of them are home educators that utilize a mixture of options like co ops and private tutors and various things like that. And so these are the leadership who are kind of running this bill. I will say that it's not Senator Gates. He's not listed among them. Not to poke at him or pick him out, but he is the one who does kind of come at this from a more institutional mindset from the public school sector. So you've got him from the public school sector, and then you've got all of these. There's several who are homeschool families, and oddly enough, several of the staff that help them behind the scenes work on the budgets and the language and pull the data and do the research and keep them up to speed are also homeschoolers. For such a small percentage of the population, we actually have a pretty decent representation among the people who are employed in the system. So I'm not saying that to give anyone a sense of false hope or a false sense of security that everything's on lock and nothing bad will happen. I think it needs to be watched like a hawk, but because everybody who has good intentions often ends up with unintended consequences. Like, hey, we wanted to do this and say this, and it's like, okay, cool, but do you realize that over here it says this, and that creates a conflict? And so little things like that go, oh no, we didn't realize that. And little things like that make the conversations take a little longer and they have to be nuanced and people have to slow down enough to dive into the weeds. But because we're talking with people who are in fact homeschool friendly, um, there's a lot of listening going on, and I'm very appreciative of that. I
We've got
can't
a
list
question
names, but
in the comments that I
mhm,
thought maybe we could hit. You were talking about how the House bill and the Senate bill are not the same.
correct.
So Brad asked, do both bills have the background check requirement?
No, both bills do not have the background check requirement. The Senate bill has the background check requirement, and where this becomes a something to watch, and what we've raised to them is that the burden of ensuring that purchases, and this is something every parent needs to be aware of, the burden of ensuring that the funds are spent on authorized uses only falls on the parent. Period. That is in the statute 1002.395 subsection 7, where it deals with parents' responsibilities. Subsection B, that's for the PEP responsibilities. Right in there, the parent has to affirm that the purchases and the funds will be for authorized uses only. So then if they put in the statute that all individual service providers have to be background checked, that now becomes the burden of the parent to ensure that they are only working with providers who have met that criteria. And because they will be the only ones who would be authorized uses, right, at that point. So it created an onerous responsibility on the parent, and I think that the Senate has listened to us on this issue, and they've heard us. And I think that you're going to see some changes come out of the language that will help reflect that. Like I said, I'm not trying to give anyone a false sense of hope. We need to be watchful and vigilant as to what the language change is and how it comes about. But we've laid out the core issue, and the parameters of it, and we've given some suggestions of what we think will fit it. And so what they'll do is they'll take that and they'll assimilate it in, and when they go into conference and they're negotiating with the House, they'll go back and forth over what's important to them. And we've done I don't want to say brag on ourselves and say we've done a really good job, but we've tried to make it as easy as possible by breaking down the words to bullet points, as well as giving specific language in as simple and clean a form as possible. That way, when they're in there and they're going back and forth, they have documents that are helpful to help them remember how to stay on track with this, or almost forgot that, and pull it over. And then it doesn't take forever to dive into the weeds of it. They can do it in a timely fashion, and then it's clear, accurate, and does what it needs to do. And so we had a huge list to begin with. Let me just say that the list that I keep seeing thrown around Facebook focuses on like maybe 3 things, and our list came close to being over 20 things in this bill. That we had lines for this and lines for that, and check the language over here, and you use this word over here, that's going to do this. And we had a lot of things that we went back and forth with, and for the most part, a lot of that stuff was technical or cleanup language. The core issues where we don't necessarily, where what we were saying is, this is going to create a burden for parents, and they go, yeah, but this is something that's really important to us. That's where we spent a lot more of our time going back and forth, and those were some of the issues that you've seen around Facebook. So, and the background checks are one of them. The 10 payments is another. It's very difficult to push back on the 10 payments because with the Senate, because they're moving everyone to that system of 10 payments. It would be different if they were moving just the PEP scholarship to the 10 payments, or just the FESUA scholarship, or just private school. But they're moving public school, private school, FESUA, home education, hybrid model. They're moving everyone systematically to the 10 payment system. So it's a much harder thing for us to push back on just that one piece,
Right.
than in the other stuff, because they're doing it systematically for everyone. So I think that might be what happens. I know that the Senate is pushing for that hard. I know that the House is not interested in that. So behind the scenes, they're going to go and compare notes, and they're going to say, well, this is really important to us, and the House is going to go, okay, but this is really important to us. And when that happens, what my conversation with both of them has been is there's an evil baby that could be born from these two parents coming together, in the form of the House has a very, very tight penalty for parents who don't submit the right paperwork, or they don't attest and affirm that they're still enrolled in PEP. They don't create the 10 payments. They do it once for each of the 4 quarters. What that would do is, if a parent fails to attest or affirm that they are still involved in the scholarship program, that their funds would revert back to the program. They would essentially be expelled from the program, and they wouldn't be able to reapply. for some time. And so that is a hefty penalty that's on, and I can only imagine the between doubling the number of times that you have to make that attestation, increasing the opportunity for software glitches or software updates that wipe out a certain number of people who attested. Well, then we can't go back and find a record of that. And like, there's any number of things that could go wrong. And I've raised these suggestions or issues with them, and they go, that's a good point. I don't know if that's a good point means they're going to do exactly what we think they should do, or if they're going to try to find their own way around it. But at least they've acknowledged that it's a real problem, and a real issue. So I think the 10 payments thing is the thing the Senate is pushing for very hard. But I also think that the parents' duties, what's the word? Making the parents affirm and participate and holding them accountable is a little bit more toward the bent of where the House is going with it. So if these two things come together, that could be highly problematic in what the conference bill looks like. So that's something that no one has really talked about yet, but that's something I'm very keen on making sure we don't end up. I'm trying to get it so that we don't end up in that situation where we have multiplied the opportunity for error, multiplied the opportunity for and increased the risk, and then there's no real benefit. Because the aim of what they're trying to accomplish is to make sure that the funds can follow the student more accurately. So if a student is deciding that they're leaving public school and they want to homeschool, and so they use the PEP scholarship, that's great. So then they go from public school into PEP. And then it takes a couple of months and they decide, no, I want to go back. Well, if they've just started third quarter, then second quarter funding drops. That funding has dropped into their scholarship and is stuck in that scholarship program versus being able to draw down the accurate funding through this public school channel. And then if they do manage to get the funding to drop, the child's been double funded. So by creating more intervals, they're able to stop the funding from landing and being stuck in an account anywhere, and the funding can more accurately follow the child. That makes sense. So does the student ID. The student ID not having this...
Take a breath.
So, okay. Go ahead.
Because there's been a lot of fraud in this program.
Yeah.
And that is their purpose in trying to come up with some measures that will keep the scholarship clean and able to continue funding parents. So it's not anything intended to harm parents or hurt the scholarship. They're just trying to make sure that the fraud actually and waste that's in it, and it may not even be a parent's intent to defraud the state, because we have at least one parent I'm aware of who had scholarship monies trying to give it back, but there's no mechanism for giving it back. So here is state money, basically, or state approved money, sitting in this child's scholarship fund, and they don't know how to get it out. So that's another thing they're going to try to address, is how to return the money to the state.
Now, I was going to say it's not just the fraud. It's also those cases where there were some kind of a glitch, like Jason mentioned, and then it just took way too long for them to discover it because the system was not set up for more frequent examinations. And I know that there are parents, like you said, that got double funded in PEP and tried to give it back and couldn't figure out how to do that. Customer service couldn't help them. And so it's not always that parents are trying to be fraudulent. It's just they've realized that there was money just kind of slipping through the cracks, and they're trying to fix that.
Well, there's also, they're trying to get a student ID number. It will not be a social security number. Just relax on that. It's going to be a state assigned student ID number so that they can track the student when they go from the PEP, or I guess the UA is already being tracked, but back and forth between public and PEP, which they haven't had. So there's no way to track a student. And they've told us, Jason, correct me if I'm wrong, that there are kids getting the scholarship that really were not supposed to be getting the scholarship because they have no way of tracking them.
Right. Yeah, there were some issues between the EO, the PEP, and FEFP funding, and there were some reports of people triple dipping somehow through um, certain enrollment tracks. I don't want to specify, but the answer then was to kind of go at it in a systematic way where everybody from public school to home education, or not home education, well, I mean, home education already has a student identification number. The scholarship for PEP didn't have a student identification number, so there was difficulty tracking them in and out of the different enrollment tracks because of that. So the uniform ID will actually do and allow the scholarship funding organizations to do what they're wanting from the parents in forms of an attestation. So once you're enrolled until unenrolled. So that mechanism, and our argument to them was that mechanism is in place with the student identification number, and that you don't need the attestation from the parent that many times.
Or even the birth certificate that's in the one of the scholarships. I think it's in the Senate, where they're going to require a birth certificate, and we were pushing back pretty hard on that.
We did push back on that, and then in that conversation, I'm interrupting you. Do you want to
Go ahead? Go ahead.
Sorry. In that conversation, it was very interesting because they kind of pointed out that the birth certificate, the purpose it serves, and the only real purpose it serves, is to demonstrate that that person is in fact real and human, that they were a birthed person and not a fake person. Because in certain circumstances, there are certain ways in which a child can be enrolled, and then the parent isn't the one having to affirm that the student is enrolled in this particular track. And so then when they go to follow up on it, it's very difficult because the entity that's responsible for that is telling them, yes, they're real, but there's no proof. And so they're able to just fake students, kind of the same way that dead people can vote for a president. And no one really wants to be in a situation where the program is being run or defrauded of funds by people who aren't real. And so it made sense. After thinking about it, we kind of agreed with them. It made sense that the birth certificate serves a purpose. And if that purpose is to keep the program from being defrauded of all of these funds, that makes sense. Let me read some of these comments here. Or Crystal,
let me just throw in here, though, in the midst of all of these major changes that are being proposed, nobody said that they have a problem with giving digital devices. That's kind of become a back issue.
That's
Which
true.
is funny because
you might
that was
see that just
such a pushed issue last year and talked about everywhere. But
well, now we have bigger fish to fry.
Yes. So we're pretty much assured that both the House and the Senate are going to put digital devices.
Yeah, they're kind of like,
it'll
nobody
just
cares
slip
about
in there.
that.
No one will
move on.
The parents will notice it for sure when the bill drops. All right, I'll hit some of the comments. Brevard Homeschool Evaluation said, that's awesome to hear representation by homeschoolers from within. Good to know. But you are right. It always needs to be watched.
Mm-hmm.
And then she said, you guys are amazing. Thank you for all that you have meticulously sifted through in the bills to make sure homeschooler rights are protected.
Thank you for being one of our supporters and being on our recognition wall. We appreciate how you're always there and coming through, and you always help us share the stream. So thank you to you too.
Dina says, can you clarify the amount of funding each of the 10 payments will have? I've heard the first payment of 10 would be larger. Is this true?
That is true. That it's actually written into the bill. We had a suggestion for them on how to further fix that so that it would be an even better situation. But the amount for each basically will take the entirety of the scholarship and break it into the 10 payments, and then double fund in the first month. Our suggestion to them was to double fund in the first month and in January, because toward the end of a school year, that last month, most of what people are looking to spend scholarship on is preparation for the next year, not the year they're currently in. So I think that would probably help, but give the funding closer to the beginning and the middle than loading any of it at the end. But yeah, I hope that clarifies.
Well,
And yes,
once they get the system working, and we were told it may take a year at least to get the student ID numbers assigned, then they may back off on some of these more cumbersome requirements, because right now they're just trying to stop that double funding and correct those issues. A lot of this is going to fall on the scholarship funding organization. They got to get their act together because they don't have the mechanism set up in place to do this yet. So they're telling us, and we're looking at next year there'll be some changes. The next year there'll be some changes. Thus, you need a lobbyist in the seat.
I was going to say, these promises that are being made, because Brenda raises a good point that while we're pushing for the parents to not have to do the attestation because that's cumbersome and gives an opportunity to erroneously and accidentally be expelled from the program with no way to kind of walk it back, that's a burden, and it's obviously a terrible idea, but it to them seems like the only way forward at the moment, because the software isn't yet in place for checking the presence of the student identification number, so they need that parent to like specifically state where their child is, and that when the software is built and when it's in place, then we'll go back and revisit that and remove that. And so these are the promises that we hear, and without having someone in the Capitol watching this constantly, like Brenda has been for the last 40 years. God bless you, Brenda. Things like that can get lost or go missing, because the same way that digital devices last year was a big hot button thing, and this year it's taking a back seat. It's like, oh, that promise that we made to you, we don't want it to take a back seat. But they might have, in their view, bigger concerns that they need to solve. But we're the ones who keep a running list of all the things that we want them to solve. Here's an example. In the statute, no one, in fact, when I started to talk with them about this issue that I raised, they said, well, that's not in the bill. And I said, I know it's not in the bill. It needs to be in the bill because it's not in the bill. And in what that issue is parents' authority over their own educational standards and curriculum is not spelled out. Private schools have that spelled out at the beginning of 1002.395, that nothing in this entire statute is to be prescriptive. Private schools retain authority over their standards and their curriculum, and it's spelled out, boom, across the board. But there is a loophole way in which, control over curriculum could be exercised, and I pointed that out to them, and I would like for that to be closed, and I would like for it to be very firm that parents have authority over standards and curriculum. And because we have homeschool friendly and homeschool participant senators and legislators, they like that idea. And hopefully we'll see that language find its way in. But it's important in doing this not just to get caught up over what you see in a bill, but the things that aren't there that need to be there, the goals that are important to protect home education in Florida. That's an invisible list. Like, it's a thing that really kind of only comes to be out of knowing what the threats potentially are or potentially could be, and then being able to circumvent them or head them off with good language that prevents them from being. And I will say that a lot of other states are really up in arms about the scholarships in their states. Parents really upset. Shekels equal shackles. You get the government funds run. You get the same kind of language thrown out over and over and over. And in Florida, it's a little bit unique because we've threaded the needle just so carefully and just so much with certain little changes right along the way at just the right time and just the right change to keep parents protected and their choices protected. For example, in Florida, the scholarship for quote unquote homeschoolers is not in the home education statute. It's not a part of home education. So home education as a legal track is totally separated out. It's called personalized education program. Brenda wanted that very, very in particularly because she didn't want the funds coming in and changing the home education statutes and landscape. She wanted parents to be able to have a choice to use the scholarship or not use the scholarship. And either way that they go, not have negative impacts on home education statutes. That was such a forward-thinking thing to do, to invent an idea that protects and prevents that encroachment. And that's a unique situation that Florida has. We don't even call it homeschooling in statute. And Brenda, back in the day, I saw 40 years later that here we are fighting over homeschooling, and there's this trend now emerging of, oh, I started a homeschool. It's a little school in my home, and we teach our kids this, and it's that, and it's a little mini school in a home.
And we invite the neighbors' kids.
Yeah, everybody can come into our little one-room schoolhouse. It's a homeschool. What a neat little thing. And so there's this hijacking of a term, and in Florida, we don't call it homeschooling. We call it home education. We lovingly call it homeschooling, just because I guess everybody always has. It's kind of like that old, what's that old adage where, why do you always cut the butt off of the ham before sticking it into the oven? It's like, I don't know. So they all call up grandma, and she's like, why do you do that? What does it do? And she goes, oh, we're poor and we didn't have a big enough pan, so we always cut it off. And it's like, what? That's why we do it? Anyway, there are little things like that.
Well,
Brenda,
I want to throw in a thought because there's a reason for why we're doing some of the things that we're doing here. Is that actually we picked up, I think it was off of one of the Facebook groups, that people were saying that the curricula was going to be limited and it was going to be published, the approved ones, on the Department of Education's website. The background on that was last year, maybe it was the year before, all these sessions run together. But the scholarship funding organizations, i.e. Step Up mainly, did not want to determine what a child with disabilities could purchase and what was going to be on their list. So they voiced that to the legislators, and the legislators came up with this great idea. They would have a state university decide what a child with disability might need. It happened to be the card centers, so actually that was a good, if you're going to pick something in a state university, that was a good placement. But then that collided with Step Up only wanting one purchasing guide. So then the way that this is all coming together, it's like, okay, so UCF is going to determine what the purchasing guide for the FESUA scholarship, but then that's going to carry over to the PEP scholarship. So we've objected to UCF being the one to determine the purchasing guide. We would rather the Department of Education, that is friendly toward homeschoolers, friendly toward these scholarships and school choice, be the one that develops it. But guess what? They don't want to do it either. Yeah. So somebody's got to do it. And we just want to make sure, going back to what Jason was talking about, that in the process of a state university that's not exactly school choice oriented, developing which curriculums are going to be on the direct provider list, that we make sure that parents have the option of choosing what curriculum is best for their children. So that's why Jason is talking about making sure that language is in it.
Sure. And as the program gets larger and the workload gets heavier, everybody seeks to make things more efficient and continue to run smoothly. And so one of our core things that we've been pushing for is that, parents' rights should never take a back seat to efficiency. And we're very clear about that in our conversations with both House and Senate, that this, whatever happens, they do need to know we will rally the home education community in Florida if they make parents' rights take a back seat.
And they don't
for
want that to
efficiency.
happen.
Yeah. So stay tuned for those things. We will help point them out, and we will help, give you an opportunity to really kind of call in and make your voice heard, or email in, or write letters in, or show up face to face and have those conversations. Because when and if it's needed, it's important. Until then, there's a lot of conversations that we've had with them. They are listening. They've made like a huge list with our issues on it, and they know what the top 5 core issues are that we would, have a knockdown drag out with, petition the governor for a veto if needed. They're aware of what those are as well. So, not to give anybody false hope or false ease, but some peace of mind that you do have a voice in the Capitol, and you do have someone there speaking for you almost every day, constantly. Especially during session, I'll have conversations. I don't know if this is how it's been for you, Brenda, over the years, but there will be nights where I'm finally getting off the phone at like 10:30 at night, and then I'm
He's on the
just
phone like all the time right now.
in
Yeah.
bed. Like then I
Yep.
get up and it's
And if
go
it's
again
not the
next day.
phone, it's emails.
Yeah.
We do
Text.
have another question.
Okay.
Brenda, were you going to say something first?
No, I was just saying, and text. Don't forget that.
Yes,
now.
and text. Brad Campen asked, what's the status on devices being covered? That's part 1. And being able to use money for college with scholarship funds.
Okay. I think we covered the status
We
on the
briefly
devices being
covered,
covered.
yeah.
Briefly. But we'll revisit it again since this is much further later in the video. So we're excited that it's in both the House bill and the Senate bill, and no one seems to be objecting in either way. So when it comes to negotiating, they'll probably just slide that one right through. And that's what we're hoping will do, and that their attention will be on these bigger issues, and that no one balks on that, because no one has balked yet. So there's always the potential that somebody could, create an issue out of nothing, what looks like nothing on paper, and then use it as a bargaining chip, but we hope not. So we're hopeful that that just slides right through because it's in both. When it comes to the money for college with the scholarship funds, it's important there's a little bit of reading between the lines in order to kind of grab what they intended and where they're going with it. But DeSantis was very clear that this scholarship, and so is the entire governor's office, we spoke with them, they're very clear that this scholarship was always meant to be a homeschool scholarship, period. That was their intent. That means that it wasn't necessarily meant to be a private school scholarship, but it also wasn't necessarily meant to be a college scholarship. And that's evidenced by the fact that FESUA, the Unique Abilities Scholarship, is able to be rolled into a 529. But whenever they were looking at writing this statute for PEP, they completely removed that, intentionally left that out. And by rules of statutory construction, if it's mentioned in one place, specifically mentioned, and then intentionally left out in another, the leaving out of it is supposed to be read as intentional, which means they weren't really. There is other language that allows the funds to be used in eligible post-secondary institutions, and so there are moments where using the funds for some of those purchases is qualified and makes sense, but it wasn't intended to be a college scholarship, if that makes sense. So there are tertiary or secondary peripheral is probably a better word, uses of the scholarship funds for that post-secondary journey, getting into and onboarded into a post-secondary. But we have Bright Futures and we have other scholarships that really come down that they're intended to be college scholarships. And so what they're trying to do is kind of narrow the field in terms of how much of that gets siphoned off into the college system for that, because they're trying to be very careful that the future of the scholarship program for the homeschool scholarship is intact. And if the funds are depleted, then the scholarships are done, right? So they're wanting to make sure that they maintain the integrity of the homeschool scholarship for its intended purpose, homeschooling. And that's why you'll see things in the Senate bill like after one fiscal year, it reverts back to the program and not two. That way it's not just sitting out in limbo for that long. They're also, if it's inactive, like say someone's just holding it and sandbagging it for college, because that's what they were thinking, that's going to revert back because it's a homeschool scholarship that clearly isn't needed for homeschooling. So their idea is if it's been sitting there for a year, completely inactive and unused, you didn't need it for homeschooling. So there's no problem with it reverting right back to the program. And so putting some of these stopgap measures in to keep the integrity of the homeschool scholarship aimed at that is what you're seeing. And I think that they overshot a little bit with the graduation being the very moment that the funds terminate. And so in my conversations with them, I kind of helped explain how home education families tend to go at their own pace. Sometimes that's faster. Sometimes that's slower. Sometimes you have a student who's learning a little bit slower, but they don't necessarily qualify for a unique abilities scholarship. And so they're in this in between where they just need a little bit of extra time. And so the parent might continue to use the funds and continue to educate them, even though their graduation date has come and gone. And they're still trying to help that student out. And so there is a period of time after graduation that the funds for that next year makes sense for them to remain around. And they kind of listened to us, and I think that they agreed. I don't know what that change is going to specifically look like when it lands, but they thought it was a reasonable request. That it wouldn't necessarily milk the program too hard. They're not getting any additional funds. They're just having time remaining to spend what remains of the funds for their homeschool use. So if the funds remain for a year or upon enrollment in a post-secondary institution, so once they've moved on to that next phase, the funds ending, that seemed to be something that they thought was reasonable and workable. So you could potentially see, Brad, some changes in that language as it goes into conference. I'm not quite sure what the House's thought on that particular issue is, because they have left in there the funds can still remain for 2 years. So that's not really their radar issue. That's really the Senate's radar issue. So seeing how they go back and forth and where that ends up will be. We'll stay in contact with them. I do have the cell phone numbers of some of them. So as things emerge and are being talked about, we should still have an opportunity to be, a voice as things progress. So
let me throw some information in as background.
Yes, ma'am.
Obviously, the Gardner Scholarship, which was a pilot program in 2014, and then it became a full-blown program for children with unique abilities. During that year, maybe the 16 or 17, the legislature required state colleges to develop programs specifically for students with unique abilities so that they could have a college experience, get some transitional skills into life, and those kids are eligible for state funding until they turn 22. So the development of that post-secondary education language, which was originally only in FESUA, for that purpose to use as they take those college-developed courses for them, made sense. When they created the PEP scholarship, they basically just picked up that language and moved it over with everything else that was in there on use of tuition, tutors, whatever else is in that language, and moved it over to the PEP scholarship. So it could be that those funds could be used, maybe that first year in college could be used for career and technical courses, could be used if a student has bright futures, could be used for books, because for home education students doing dual enrollment, the books are free. So there may be some uses like that where parents could use the PEP funds, but it's not really intended, as Jason said, as a college scholarship.
Yeah, there's a follow-up question on this from Deline Howell, which is one that I've wondered about as well.
Okay.
Will step up force graduation based on our declared grade number? For example, she says her mother-in-law has a 12th grader. Is he auto-graduated from the program at the end of the year? And what is that part looking like on step-up side? And I'll just add to that you said a lot of home educators go at their own pace.
Yep.
I've known plenty of families that have extended their senior year into 2 years, for example, because their child needed more time to kind of master the concepts. So those are the situations that, Deline is bringing up here. Are they going to be auto-graduated just because in step-up system, they've hit 12th grade and completed that year?
That's an argument we're going to have. We've had that. I've had that with the school districts who, when they put the home education student into their system, they put them in at a grade level. So I had to go back into statute and say the superintendent cannot assign a grade level to home education students. So we took that language so that they couldn't auto graduate them. They could stay in until the parents declared. However, now we've got a different group of people that we're going to have to deal with. So we don't have an answer
because
to that question.
Step up does make parents declare a grade level. Not just when you apply, but every year at renewal, you have to reconfirm your child's grade level.
Yeah.
So there could be a potential, up until 12th grade, you could potentially say your child's in 8th grade 2 years in a row. I don't know if their system would kick that back with some kind of error or not. But 12th grade is the question, because you won't maybe have a chance to even renew if they just auto graduate you.
So there's two things to consider here. One is what does the statute allow, and then two, what needs to be preserved to preserve homeschooling, the way that we do it. And right now, the way that it works is you declare your grade level, and then you're receiving a scholarship X number of times until you're out, right? So they're going to look at it from a fiscal responsibility standpoint of like, oh, am I holding back a kid every year for 2 years? Like, that's 24 years of scholarship funding. If the system is written in such a way that it allows for gaming the system. So they're going to want to plug that hole to match the intent. But in doing so, we also need to just make sure that home education and homeschooling ways are preserved. So if a parent is pacing it a certain way, and I think that's why it's important to stay on top of these things, but to also kind of understand the intent. Keeping a student for a 12th grade year doesn't maybe entitle you to another round of scholarship, right? So the question being very clearly asked, will they force graduation? They might not necessarily force graduation, and they don't have to based on statute, but they can enforce that there's not another year of funding beyond the 12th grade year. So that it's not the same use of language that you're using there, but it does kind of, we have to look at it in terms of protecting the integrity of the program while also getting our child's needs met.
Well, and this honestly was less of a concern before the current language where the funds terminate upon graduation, because previously you still had access to those funds. So even if the system had auto-graduated you at 12th grade, you could still continue to use the funds until they were depleted. You just weren't getting new funds.
Right.
But if they're going to terminate them upon graduation, this becomes a much bigger concern.
Yes. They could clearly say that the child is no longer entitled to funding after graduation, and then allow them to use a year
Additional funding, yeah.
to use the funding in their account.
Right.
Yes.
So, and I think this is that is Deline, what initially caught my eye about it too. Deline says, "I'm so glad that's on your guys' radar. It was immediately on mine when I realized I would be required to input a numbered grade level regularly." Um, upon graduation point is where that really becomes an issue, and trying to guard the program in such a way that it's fiscally responsible, but also guard home education choices or homeschooling choices in the way that traditionally we do, especially considering children who might need more time or extra time. Those kids who graduate early, that's a different story. They've moved on. They're done. But it's really important to thread that needle and to push back and get them to understand, what it's like to do homeschooling. And hey, Dina. Oh, that's probably Isaiah saying it's me. um, the I think we answered your question, but I wanted to get to the second. I wanted to go back a little bit into because there was kind of a two-parter here. Is he auto-graduated from the program at the end of the year? Okay, this is the second part. What is that part looking like on Step Up's side? So that's the real, that question for all of these issues is one of the big hairy problems, right? What does it look like? How is that implemented from background
And
checks
I just want to interject
to,
really quick that Deline is specifically asking that because she has had some run-ins with massive glitches on Step Up side. So that
she
is
was
a
the one
very
who,
valid question for her to ask.
was it like April of the first year before she got her funding to drop or something like that?
Yeah, it was a
I can't
ridiculous
remember
amount of time that her
Yeah.
kids' funding just had been removed, and then it was put back, and then inaccessible, and then she was double funded at one point. It was just, she's had a massive, thankfully a rare number of complications, but yes.
Yeah,
She's had massive complications.
She's the poster child for why we don't want 10 attestations because the glitches can be, I mean, can you even imagine if that scenario and the house's penalties and the 10 opportunities all got mixed together? Oh, yeah. So, but back into that second parter though, which is what does that look like on Step Up's end? That's the real kind of kicker. Is what are all of these things going to look like on their end? Are they all of these changes? And I think that they're going to have to weigh in to a large degree behind the scenes and give some information on that. And I'm hopeful that we end up in a good place with this as it goes into conference, and I think we will. But it's something to keep an eye on. Speaking of keeping an eye on things, if you haven't, we haven't really fully launched and announced it yet, but we are launching our Discord server. So if you're interested, if you're watching this or you know someone would be interested and you want to be added to it, we're still doing early onboarding, and we'll probably keep doing that until maybe the end of the month, and then we're going to open it up and fully launch it. We're hopeful that the Discord server becomes a place where people can communicate over issues like this in real time, that we can bring on ambassadors from different parts of Florida who can help us run and admin their areas. Let's say that you have things that going on in your area that you need people to know about, share helpful articles or things like that. There will be a section for each county in the Discord, and allow people who are, let's call you movers and shakers. You're the boots on the ground. You know what your communities are doing and what their needs are. You know the faces and the people, and you can help coordinate in your county on a local level. So there will be a space in there for you. There will be some spaces in there for things like Bright Futures, where I'm hopeful that we can get. There is a very real need with PEP and home education and the different ways that these are handled. There's very real need for people who know how to navigate the kind of nuances with their homeschool or their home education office in their county, and be ambassadors just even for Bright Futures in and of itself, so that when questions or emails or calls come in, I can dump them in there and say, hey, to my Bright Futures savvy helpers, here's a Bright Futures issue that needs to be followed up on. Who can take the call? And I can have volunteers who are just, that's their thing, and they know how to do that, help make those calls for us. And then we can provide you with the information that you need, and you can help follow up. So really designing this in a way where community can come together in advocacy. There are other places where community comes together and you guys share and help and talk and chat. This is particularly going to be useful when it comes to advocacy. If there are campaigns that are happening in your area and you want to do a walk, or you need some resources or some materials, that will be a place where you can go and say, hey, I need some flyers, or hey, I need this, or who do I talk to, or how can I connect this, or oh, I met so-and-so. They really had a good time with them. They're going to be really useful moving forward. You should get to know them, and you can help make some of those introductions, or we can provide you with some of the resources and materials that might help things be easier for you there. So if you haven't joined the Discord app, send us an email at info@flhef.org and just say, add me to the app, and we'll take care of that.
We've got.
Can I make a point here? Oh, go
Yes,
ahead,
ma'am.
Crystal. You don't say much.
I was just going to say, we've got one more question that I actually
Sure.
think would be a good one for Brenda to answer, but you can go ahead first with what you're
Okay,
going to say.
I wanted to make a point. As you can
Yes,
see, the more Jason builds community, the more help we're going to need, because Jason and Crystal are limited in time. We need to focus at the top level, dealing with the legislative issues, but one came up this week and he mentioned Bright Futures. We got a new person over there. I had trained somebody and we had worked together and they were awesome. We just call her up and say, hey, we got a problem. Now we've got a problem with the new person that's over Bright Futures. We're going to need people that can spend their time helping, because Jason said, and this is true, October, we're going to start committee meetings for the next session, which is January, February. We hardly get a breather from this one before we move into the next one. And during that breather, when this bill passes with all of these new changes to the scholarship, guess who's going to get to deal with those at the top level? So the work is just so hard and so time consuming that, number one, we need support so Jason and Crystal can continue doing what they're doing. Number two, we need people who are willing to invest their time in picking up some of these fringe issues. And we've got a supporter now, board member in Jacksonville, who has been an incredible help to us in legislative session, taking on the FHSAA. I mean, that is his thing. And so we've been able to just sort of off-put some of those issues to him and let him take over. And otherwise, we would not have been able to do all the things we're doing this session. So, that's why Florida has a good law and good climate here, is because you have somebody to advocate. What am I trying to say? Advocate for parents' rights and for home education, families, and freedoms in Florida. So it's just gotten bigger and bigger. We got more people, and we really do need those people that will step forward and take on kind of the headship of some of these issues.
And now, just to add to that real quick, I was talking with one of the representatives last week. And I met her for the first time. She's one of the Leon County ones up here. And I was telling her a little bit about what we do and, how to connect if she has homeschoolers in her area, see us as a resource, and here's what we work on. And she goes, oh, great. What do you charge for your services? And I said, they're free. And she was like, oh, wow. I'm like, yeah. We don't charge for our services. We exist based on the support of families in Florida, people who are listening, who like what we do and know what we do and know about us and help spread the word. And it's $5 or $10 a month. And, that's how we do it. And then it's just work from there. But no, we don't charge anybody or hold anybody's issues hostage to whether or not they can pay a mercenary for hire to go fix them for them. We've had everything from uh, driver's licenses that have just been revoked because someone was truant but by mistake, and we help get involved with issues like that, to my bright futures and they're not allowing me to input it and I don't know how to do this, and we'll go advocate in that, to my kid can't play wrestling, help, I'm supposed to be able to do this but they won't let me, what do I do? And we get involved in that. There's never a moment where we're charging for our services, so it's something that it felt good, because every other time where I have gone into a situation where I offer services in marketing or anything else, they're like, well, what do you charge for your services? And I have to break out a price plan and do all of these things, and I didn't have to. And that felt really good to just say, hey, we do the right thing because it's the right thing to do, but we do only exist because of the support of families across Florida. So if you know someone who's not a supporter, share this with them and let them become one.
And encourage grandparents to get involved.
Oh, yeah.
You know, they finished homeschooling, but their grandchildren are homeschooled, and they probably have more free cash than they would if, when they were spending it on home educating. Just build our base, because we really need the advocates in Tallahassee.
Yes. All right, Crystal, last question.
Yes, last question. This is from Brad Campen again. He said, along these lines, but the opposite situation, does dual enrollment affect homeschool grade level? Example, can you be in the 8th grade and a freshman in college?
Those are two
Probably
questions.
not.
Yeah, those are two questions that are separate. So
Yeah.
let's take the last one first.
It seems like his core question is, if you're having to declare a grade level, like for PEP, are they looking at that when you're applying for dual enrollment? That seems to kind of be what he's getting at. Like, does your grade level matter?
Yeah, I think taking the second one first, can you be in 8th grade and a freshman in college? I think that your high school transcript doesn't even start until 9th grade. So I don't know that that's necessarily governed by PEP in the PEP scholarship program, as much as that might be spelled out elsewhere.
Those are usually policies of the state colleges that have their own boards that determine when a child can be eligible for dual enrollment. And in some cases, it was based on a court case, I think in Kentucky a while back. There's liability for them having 16-year-olds on campus. So they pretty much limited dual enrollment to junior and senior year. They will allow occasionally a 10th grader, but those are not high school policies or PEP policies. Those are policies from the state colleges.
Right.
And then coming at his question from the other direction, if you're dual enrolled, would that affect what grade you're marked? I think is the other angle.
So the question is, does dual enrollment affect homeschool grade level? So there's not a homeschool grade level in Florida. Home education is an enrollment statute, and PEP is an enrollment track as well. And so based off which one of those you would be in that program. Dual enrollment isn't going to change your home education grade level, and it's not going to change your PEP grade level. So it's not going to change them. You may be required to be transparent about if you're going to dual enroll. We're up to this point in our home education, and so the student is this age and can enroll. And so there will be some transparency that you'll have to do. A lot like whenever a student goes to play sports at a public school, they have to make sure that their GPA is up. There's some academic standards they have to meet and behavioral standards that they have to meet, just like everyone else. So they kind of have to give an idea of where they are with those. Just for the
Let me just say, for dual enrollment, all that is required is that the child pass the PERT or a comparable test. I've forgotten the right word for that, but a test score on an SAT or ACT, then they can accept that. I would caution parents, I don't care how bright your child is, they're still somewhat immature. and you're putting them, especially if they're on campus, with students that are older and maybe not necessarily the kind of influences you would want on your child, I would find something else to engage that child's intellect in, maybe, working for somebody that as a volunteer, or learning a different kind of thing, even skills for manufacturing, which are always good, or doing some sort of robotics training, something that child can do that would really keep him engaged in learning. But he is building a college transcript. And if you've got an 8th grader who actually can pass those tests to get in as a dual enrollment student, they may not be able to carry that classroom situation and come out with less than they would if they went in at an older age, because of all the influences. And yet that's going to be their college grade for that course. So just use caution.
Yeah.
Pushing the child ahead is not always in the best interest of the child.
Words of wisdom from Brenda. That's what Tracy from FPEA says. Hello, Tracy. Thank you for being with us. And yes, that is words of wisdom from Brenda. And I think that wraps up our legislative update. While I appreciate everything Brenda said, it's not meant to be prescriptive or the only way anyone can do it. If you're a risk taker and you want to risk it, you go right ahead. It's your freedom to do so. I always kind of get caught on the conversation of freedom, as it's freedom to be wise and freedom to be not so wise. So it's still your freedoms,
That's
your
right.
choices. Do with them what you will. And if you can thread that needle and your kid gets ahead, your kid's the exception to the rule, by all means, power to you. And we love those freedoms. We fight for those freedoms here in Florida. And we want to make sure that parents have those freedoms at every turn to make those choices for their own students. But I do agree with you, Brenda. I see it the way you see it.
I'm just throwing out some things they may not have thought about, from years of watching this happen. I just think that, parents get excited about how bright my child is and they can just move ahead. But, what's at the end of moving the head? Have they missed out on being a child?
Well, look,
And,
here's a really
life
interesting.
experiences.
Yeah, this is really interesting. I was looking up some things the other day about taking the LSAT, and law school and things like that, because I've just been curious and interested, and the kids have talked a little bit about it. We saw a TV show with a lawyer lawyers in it, and they're like, "Oh wow, that's interesting." You can get so many prep classes and courses, and you can take the preview LSATs as so many different times, and there's free resources you can just dive into. Google has an entire repertoire of certifications that you can dive into, and they're free. And some of them, if you pay, you can get like the certification, or you can just take the class for free and get the instruction and the information, like Klepping courses. And it blows my mind how much is already available that no one has to drop a penny for, because the internet is so vast and has so much information, and there are so many resources. I don't understand how colleges and universities keep a chokehold on higher education. I don't get it. I don't understand how anyone sees them as the gatekeepers to higher learning anymore. If it's convenient, it's convenient, and if it's not, it's inconvenient. And right now, I can go Google any number of things and jump down a rabbit hole and come out with lots and lots of information and research and peer-reviewed articles and citations. I can educate myself till I'm blue in the face and learn as much as I want to learn and don't have to spend a penny for it. And it's a beautiful thing where we are in time in the history of mankind for that to be the case, because it was not always so. And it's a wild thing to be waking up to in our modern time. So be that as it is, AI may ruin it for everybody here soon. So who knows? Who knows? All right. Well, I'm going to let everybody get back to their Monday. We want to say special thank you to our top sponsors one more time. Always Irritate, FPEA, Fisher Precious Metals, and TVHC Group. Let's see. Brenda, any last words?
Nope, I've said all my last words.
All right. I'll roll us out then. Thank you guys for being with us. We hope that your day is fruitful, that you make all the memories, do all the things, and we'll see you all next Monday. If you have any other questions or concerns or need help, post it in the forum. And if you want to be on our Discord app, send us an email saying, add me to the app, and we'll get you right on that.